Hello again. This is the Hypnotorious Podcast. I'm David Barron. With me is John Wylie. Hello, John.
Hi, everybody.
And as you know, if you've been listening regularly, we publish this every week. We are hypnotists and basically talking about anything that is regarding hypnosis. And it's really for anybody who is interested in hypnosis, whether they're just a bystander who likes to study it, to someone who is seriously wanting to use it to make a change, and even for professional hypnotists. Mm-hmm. So what's a great topic we can talk about today, John?
I think what we should talk about is pre-talk.
The pre-talk. Oh, good.
Pre-talk,
Tell me.
Interview, etc. Yeah.
Well, I have my own idea of what pre-talk means. What does that mean to you?
Well, I think that the pre-talk, I think we're pretty much on the same page here, is right from the very first moment that you have contact with that potential client, you're starting your pre-talk.
Mm-hmm. I think a lot of hypnotists have been trained to limit their pre-talk to, when the client is getting ready to do hypnosis in the chair. And I'm so familiar. I've seen it so many times that it's often the very same pre-talk, no matter who is doing it, where they talk about the conscious and the subconscious mind and the critical factor, and how the subconscious mind is like the bottom of the iceberg. And it's a very useful understanding. It usually takes about 20 minutes to go through that particular pre-talk. And it is useful information, and typically what it is designed to do is get the client comfortable and have an understanding in some way or another of what hypnosis is.
Right.
I don't know. I have some general feelings about that particular pre-talk. What do you think about it?
Well, I think long before you actually sit down with the client and have that educational, informative question answering session, for example, when I answer the phone, and this is kind of a little secret I maybe shouldn't share.
Okay.
But do you know what? I'm going to anyway.
I'll share some of my secrets, and you share some of yours.
Okay. So when I answer the phone, hello, this is John Wylie with Boise Hypnosis. How can I help you succeed? And I think that's a really good, it's a great way to answer the phone. It's also the really great beginnings of a pre-talk, because you're setting the frame there right from the outset. And then, of course, we have our conversation. I give them an opportunity to get all their questions answered. I explain how to find me and basics of the process.
Right.
And then, of course, once they sit down, they fill out a little bit of paperwork. Part of it I fill out with them for several reasons. But I like to show them a video. And I know not everybody is that way, but I have found that useful. That way I make sure that certain things get covered.
Right. What is your video describe?
My video basically talks about how your hypnotist or hypnotherapist thinks of the mind, the model. Certainly not the only model, but it's the model that most hypnotherapists ascribe to, of the unconscious mind, the subconscious mind, the conscious mind. This particular video differentiates the difference between the unconscious mind and the subconscious mind, but that's not necessarily critical. It's not really that important in my opinion.
Right.
But this particular one does, and it talks about examples, lots of really good examples of everyday times when people experience hypnosis. They just don't realize it. Things like when they're driving in their car, or when they're making a sandwich and they can't find the mustard, and there's a fun little story in there that I reiterate in my book about negative hallucinations and how easy it is for those kinds of things to happen, even in mundane situations like making a sandwich, to
Hmm.
negatively hallucinate. And I think all those things are very important. Um, what about you? What kinds of things do you cover in your pre-talk?
Well, I mean, for me, again, the pre-talk is it starts at the very first contact with the client, and I have a whole bunch of things I want to just assume in that conversation or presume. So I want to presume that I am the preeminent authority in the area. So the first thing I'll always do is I'll ask them to describe it in as much detail, whatever they want to change.
Uh-huh.
And most of the time, having done it long enough, I've seen it all. So I can actually say, I have worked with that, and it is something I am very familiar with. I've had some very good success with it. So I'm not promising they're going to succeed, but I'm telling them my history is something that I've been
Good.
successful at. Um, and then I will describe. When I use the word commitment, I say what I do is I require a 3-session commitment from my clients, and I describe what each of the 3 sessions are very briefly. And again, and I will also during that time talk about, I've been doing this for 20 years. Um, I've had this particular practice, excuse me, for this amount of time, and then then this is again during just a phone call. What I will then do is I want to presume that I'm hard to schedule, so I will tell them, I'll say, I do have my calendar here. Let me look at it and see if I can find an opening. I never say an appointment. I don't say let's schedule an appointment. I say let me see if there's an opening. So again, we're using a little bit of scarcity.
Yeah,
Uh,
that's
the
important.
the very
I
last,
do that too.
yeah, the very last thing I say that I remind them is that I remind them that in order to secure this appointment, I need a credit card uh, number, and I don't charge the credit card, and this simply is something that adds the air of professionalism to me because I do not like people making appointments and not showing up. So
Right.
in that way, they're very committed. Um, I also let them know I'm going to send them some information by email, and there are certain things they have to read and maybe fill out beforehand. This goes along with a study that says if someone buys a product and they at least do something interacting with the product, they become more committed to it. So, for example, you you listen to a infomercial and you buy this call it a nutritional supplement, and you buy
Hmm.
it for $3 the first payment, but then a whole bunch of money in subsequent payments. Yeah, so you have this real incredible opportunity to turn back and say maybe this is really stupid. But if they say put this in the refrigerator, store in the refrigerator, you're now interacting with this product and doing something with it that means you're investing time in it. And
Hmm.
so I have them. I send them those forms so that they interact with that and they become more and more invested in the whole process. And the forums have some information about what they can do. Like they can already start to listen to some hypnosis audios that I have, and I, share the link with that. That only helps them, get their mind more prepared to the hypnosis that we would do. Um,
Right.
Now, when I sit down with them, often the very first thing I like to do is I want to compliment them and thank them for their sincerity, and they're being genuinely wanting to change. And I do that it's a behavioral engineering process I learned from the Ellipsis Manual by Chase Hughes. If you mention sincerity in any context, people now have that in their awareness and they are tend to going to act sincerely.
Mhm. You're priming for it, in other words.
Exactly, priming for sincerity. Um, let's see, a couple things I do want to point out during this pre-talk is I talk about the conscious and the subconscious mind. And I don't need to do it in a lot of detail. I just want them
Right.
to know that the mind has these parts to it. And I typically say, the conscious mind is the part that wants you to change. And everyone comes to me because they want to make a change consciously. But the subconscious mind has some other different thing going on. So you may want to stop smoking, but the subconscious mind wants a cigarette. And then I point out it's not broken. It's doing a job that you assigned it, and it's doing it really well. It's now totally outdated, and we just have to give it a new set of information. That tends to make it very simple and understandable. Um, and the one thing I consistently ask them is if they've done hypnosis before, and most have not, so I'll ask them, what do you think it feels like to be hypnotized? Because I want them to sort of imagine being hypnotized. Again, we're priming.
Right.
And so they'll tell me whatever it is, and I will always agree with it. But I'll also add to that and I'll say for me, what hypnosis is an intensely pleasant, wonderful feeling of focus. Because I want them to want to get there.
Yeah.
And I always point out that for
It's
me,
important.
my objective is to get your focus so enjoyable and so intense and so pleasurable that when you're done, you open your eyes and you say, "Wow." And I get that a lot. It doesn't happen all the time, but I get it a lot. So
Hmm.
again, I want them really eager and looking for. I
That's
mean,
great.
yeah, I think we might have talked about this before. Going for the wow in
Yeah.
hypnosis. I want them to be just totally blown away from the experience, and then it gets them eager. And then I tell them how simple it is. I says, your responsibility to get there, just follow my instructions. That's it. Just follow my instructions.
Yeah.
And they'll go, oh, okay. Yeah, it's like, you mean that's it? Yeah, just follow my instructions.
Mm.
So I've sort of built it up as incredibly pleasant and then also incredibly simple if you just follow my instructions. Um, and that's pretty much the essence of my pre-talk. Usually that does not take more than 5-10 minutes. Um, and the important points in that are letting them have an understanding of the subconscious and the conscious mind.
Right.
The second point is how to how I see hypnosis and how pleasant it is, the experience of being hypnotized, and then how simple it is for them to get there. If I'm able to do that, they're pretty much ready. So that's the essence of it. Very seldom do I find people. Occasionally, I find people I have to do more work with, um,
Right.
and those what I usually have to do is um, it's called either negative dissociation or positive association. I sort of intuit or find out the people that they admire, and
Okay.
I will say, let's say for example they're athletes, and I'll say, one thing I find about really successful athletes is they have the ability to do two things, and that is they have the ability to focus, but they also know when it's really important to just let go. Do what you've been trained to do. And so, and again, that lets them know what's important is focusing, and they value athletes, so they associate that with themselves.
That's good.
Uh,
I like that.
the other
That
one,
idea of surrender, I think, is really important
yeah,
to touch
that's
on. And
letting go and surrendering. I have experimented with having a questionnaire form that is designed to sort of prime those sort of things out, like what do you find, what has had the most positive impact in your life, acceptance or letting go when you're with someone you trust. And so here again, we're sort of priming. I don't use that all the time though, but if I really wanted to get into it, or I really wanted to be super clinical, really put people through the through the blender, so to speak, and get them ready to respond quickly, that would be one of the things I would do.
Right. Or
And my,
maybe if you're running across, I can see the value in trying something like that if you've run across somebody that's been to a hypnotist before and they had a lot of trouble, they had difficulty,
mhm,
um, to take some extra steps like that. That might be
right,
helpful in a situation like that.
right, right. And I also remember our mentor, one of the people who trained us, Jeff Stevens. His entire pre-talk was, "What do you want?" That was it.
Right.
And he had a good way of justifying it. He said, by the time someone sees me, they've tried everything else. They already know I'm a hypnotist. They're willing to pay me a fair amount of money just by sitting in my chair. So I don't have to prepare them. I don't have to do a pre-talk. They're ready. And I've tried that, and it works. It works very well for most people.
Yeah.
But
It worked for him well.
it certainly did. It certainly did. I really like sort of doing the massaging their mind, getting them really eager for the whole process.
Yeah, I like to do things a little differently than that too.
Yeah, yeah. Any other how about the one thing that comes to mind is how can you arrange your environment of the hypnosis room, for example, because it in itself is part of the hypnosis experience, and so when
Yeah.
they enter it, it is also linked to the pre-talk. It's there to prepare them. What have
Right.
you done?
Well, there are several things. That's a really good question. Um, Previously in my office, and I'm in the process of getting some new frames, but one of the things that I like to do is with pictures. I have a series of 3 pictures that I like to hang up in my office. The first one is of a caterpillar, and the next one is a cocoon, and then the next one is a beautiful butterfly. And it really elegantly is a beautiful metaphor for change. Um, and I don't point it out or anything. I just position it so that where I set the client as we're having our conversation, uh, it's right in front of them, and they can't help but see it. Right.
Wow.
Another thing that I do
And these
is,
are 3 separate pictures that
yeah,
hang separately.
this is a series of 3 photographs.
Oh, you're gonna have to post that to your Facebook page. I want to see it.
Okay, yeah,
All
I
right.
can do that.
Right.
But yeah, that's a nice metaphor. Uh, and then another thing that I like to do is I have a really big, super comfy recliner chair. And I haven't always had that chair, but um, my clients just freaking love that big, comfy chair. And I don't let them sit in it right away.
All right.
Uh, I'll have them sit down in a straight back chair during our conversation. And if they go to sit in the chair when they first come in, I will kindly direct them to a different chair. Or I'll mention, you're not ready for the big chair yet. And because the big chair is kind of an anchor, it's
Yeah.
like a spatial anchor, and that's where people go to make powerful and profound changes. And during the pre-talk, um, I'll often make implications around that idea,
Hmm.
um, and then when they do get to the big chair, it's even more special. Right?
Right.
That's a special place.
Oh, good. Oh, I like that. Very good.
Yeah.
Okay. Excellent. Well, mine.
Yeah.
What's interesting, I managed to sort of, I too have pretty much a very sort of nondescript wall. I do have a picture hanging that does not really attract too much attention to itself, which is sort of what I like. And again, two chairs. So I will typically, if someone comes, it's not a straight back chair. It's padded, but it does not recline. And I'll interview them in that. Whenever I do mention hypnosis, I just point to the other chair. So I'm already linking that to the recliner chair. And
Good.
typically, I don't want them really to get too comfortable in hypnosis. I mean, I want them comfortable, but I don't want them going to sleep. So my recliner does not go all the way back.
Oh,
It can kick
okay.
their feet up. Occasionally I have people who, sort of get in the chair into a fetal position. And, that's generally means I have some work to do because they have some security issues. Uh, but for the most part, it's the office is comfortable looking. I don't have anything specific other than the chairs that to anchor the hypnosis. But I really like the idea of the butterfly cocoon, caterpillar cocoon
Hmm.
and butterfly. That's really good.
There is another, now that I think about it, um, there's a little sign that I got from, I picked it up somewhere, I can't remember, but it's made out of wood, and it's just the wooden letters spelling relax. And that's kind of off to the side too. And it's not something that would really draw somebody's attention, but the subconscious notices everything.
Yeah.
And little images and little symbols like that prime the mind towards relaxation and surrender and all those other
Hmm.
useful things that we've been talking about. They can be a big help. And there's that too. And then I like to use music in my sessions as well.
Right.
And that helps mask background noises
Hmm.
from other things that are going on, and also it's very soothing, it's very relaxing, and people love it.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, I do, again, talking about the setting and environment. A hypnotist I did some work with had a really neat setup. Her chair was the chair for the hypnosis subject would sit in, was sort of at an angle and facing a wall, not facing directly, but facing at an angle, the wall, in which if you were in the chair, you were looking at this portrait. And everything was sort of focused around this this portrait, so your attention was very naturally headed in one direction right in front of you.
Hmm.
Um, and the portrait didn't have anything to do with hypnosis. It looked like something like a Rembrandt of some sort. But she had a background behind it and the frame and then everything off to the side. And the chair was just nose directed right toward it from an angle. So I thought that was interesting. Again, it's a way of just keeping the attention. And so when people would
Hmm.
sit in there, they would just naturally sort of point their head in that direction because that's the most obvious thing to look at. Um,
Yeah.
yeah.
So you've already got a focal point
Hmm.
right out of the chute, which is helpful.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm thinking also about, going back to the times of Anton Mesmer and how he would do the pre-talk. And of course he had his own ideas of, the magnetic fluids that are in the body
Right.
and how do you direct them. And and he'd bring these people into a salon, and he would be dressed up in a I don't know what you would call it, a surgeon's or no, not a surgeon, a magician's outfit,
Right.
a priest's outfit,
Robes, something
and
like
he
that.
would tell them what's what's going to happen, and then he would do it, and simply because he's demonstrating that authority, people had incredibly dramatic results. And so I think part of this also has to do with being able to demonstrate your authority, not by saying anything about it, but by your demeanor, by your dress, by your state of confidence. And even by your website, if that's a source where you get clients. Um,
Right.
and if you can demonstrate that authority, and also at the same time, part of that authority is just directing people to do things. So have them sit in this chair, like you said, or um, I will occasionally ask someone, could you reach over and hand me a tissue? Just so they get comfortable following instructions,
Right.
um, and getting those little acts of compliance. So that's also part of the whole authority and pre-talk thing. And I think I have not really done this to the degree that I could, but if I got a tailored suit, a very, I love the look that some business people have that demonstrates authority, but it's never been something I've wanted to do regularly. So yeah,
No.
I just have
I
a
like to look nice when I
right.
see clients, but I hate ties. So
Yeah,
I wear a nice button-up dress shirt, nice dress slacks, nice shoes, nice belt without the tie.
yeah,
And for my style, I think that's perfect. You said some really interesting things that I wanted to comment on. As far as one of the really cool things about the Ellipsis manual that we were mentioning earlier, is there's a whole section on there on entrainment, and that's taking this idea of building response potential, building
yeah.
compliance to a whole new level,
Yeah.
and it's pretty cool.
Well, and I've talked with Chase Hughes, who discussed this, and he said with incredible confidence that no one cannot be hypnotized, especially if you're going to put them through the entrainment process. And okay, so for someone who is not familiar with that, the entrainment process is a simple command and follow the command type of exercise. So it starts off, lift your right hand, lower your right hand, and of course, as the subject hears this, he's simply instructed to do it. And eventually, what happens, and the whole objective of this is whatever you say in that moment, they do simply as a matter of response. The whole idea is
Right.
to get the neurons of the brain, the ones that hear your voice, right next to the ones that follow the instruction,
Making
and
it automatic.
making it automatic.
It's
Yes.
an automatic response.
And I've talked with Chase, and he says when he's doing entrainment, his goal is that if he is out with one of the subjects he's worked with, and he just turns and says, sit on the ground, they sit on the ground, and they don't even give it a thought. That's his objective.
Yeah.
And he can get some
Wow.
incredibly dramatic results with people. But he does some incredibly interesting experimental types of hypnosis with them too. Um, so,
Yeah.
and I have not done entrainment to the degree that he does it. He has 4 levels of entrainment. They each take maybe 5-6 minutes to do, and he'll sort of break them up. And they go from very simple ones to responses to saying things. Um, say the word thunderstorm, say the word movie, things like that. Ultimately, the third level, he has them move about the room, stand up, walk to the wall and touch it, sit back down, things like that. And the
Hmm.
very last one, he does the very same thing, but he induces hypnosis. So they're in a trance state and they're responding. And certainly, I'm convinced if you get someone to that state, you're going to have very dramatic results with them.
Right.
So again, it's not something I've brought to the level that he does, but it's impressive. And I keep thinking I'm going to, but I don't really find my clients really needing it that much, needing to go to that depth.
Right. But it's an interesting tool, and it's definitely something that would be
Hmm.
interesting to experiment with. especially with those clients that are have a particularly resistant problem that they're
Yeah.
trying to resolve. That might be something that somebody would want to spend some time doing before they
Yeah,
ever even do hypnosis.
I guess I just have to decide to do it. I mean, the whole entrainment process, to that degree, takes maybe about a half hour. And so that's just a half hour of a normal hypnosis session. But by that time, I would imagine they'd be incredibly responsive, you know,
Yeah. Well,
lots
there's
of
one other thing.
compliance.
Yeah. And I think that would be kind of fun too to play with. Not just doing it, but also on the receiving end. I think that
Oh
it
yeah,
would be interesting um, to see that develop that automaticity,
right.
right? I
Yeah.
can remember the first time that I was playing with hypnosis. I was doing some self-hypnosis, and I started to give myself suggestions that my arm was starting to get lighter and lighter and lifting and rising and rising and lifting, and it was so amazing when my arms started to all by itself. I
Hmm.
wasn't lifting it at all. Um, that feeling of automaticity to start to develop in that limb, and the arm just starts going up and up and up. I'm like, damn, that's so cool.
Yeah.
You know,
Oh yeah.
there's one other thing that I wanted to mention too, David, in as far as creating authority, um, along the lines of, we've been talking about doing the entrainment
Hmm.
and the compliance questions, asking them to do things for you and move here and move there. And that's a big part of Jeffrey Stevens' training too.
Right.
He incorporates that. But one of the subtle things that I do in my office is I have my certifications and my diplomas, my credentials, or at least some of them, not all of them. Um, it's not really room there for that, but um, many of my certificates I have right behind me from the perspective of where I have
Oh,
my clients sit. So I am I'm right in front of these credentials,
good.
and I think that that's a powerful way to communicate that authority to the subconscious mind too.
Hmm.
So I don't think the conscious mind necessarily even recognizes that, but the subconscious mind certainly does.
Right. Right. Good point. Very good point. Yeah, and again, one of the things that is again conveying authority. The fact for that I have a secretary that answers my phone calls.
Yes.
That adds a level, or at least a answering service of some sort that will answer the phone calls before directing it to me.
Yeah.
That adds a
That's
quality of
something I wish
credibility.
I had. Absolutely.
Yeah.
I really wish that I had somebody to answer the phone for me, because it would be better. Mm.
I will find, I know people who will do that for you.
Yeah, but how much how much will they charge?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know. But
Yeah.
yeah, that's another way of doing it. Well, um, I'm wondering if there's any other things we can sort of throw in here that sort of add to the the
Pre-talk.
quality of a pre-talk. Yeah. Um, I think for me, again, making sure they understand there's a difference between and I don't, again, not having to go into big detail, but there's a difference between the conscious and the subconscious mind. Uh, Building anticipation for hypnosis by painting it as just over the top, wow, amazing, and enjoyable, and then describing how simple it is to get there. Those are the three I would teach somebody.
Hmm.
Um, I don't know how would you synopsize your basic pre-talk and what you'd want to get across?
Well, those things. The only other thing that I would add is I think that it's important to make sure that all of your clients' questions are answered. One of my goals is I want to make sure that my client is comfortable
Right.
with entering hypnosis, regardless of the style that a hypnotherapist may have. Whether they're um, more traditional or super direct like Jeffrey Stevens, or somewhere in between, or some other style. It's important that they feel comfortable, that they feel um, not fearful, because
Right.
fear will absolutely interfere with the process, will throw a wrench in the works,
Yeah,
for sure.
I think one of the best, and I agree with you completely. One of the best ways of doing that is in the initial phone call. I want them to talk as much as possible about
Hmm.
what the change is, the situation, how it's affected them, and and I just listen. I come from a place of non-judgment. Let them know
Right.
they're welcomed here. And if I can, when we talk next, mention anything that I remember them saying in the call, it sort of reconnects them. It tells them, at least on some level, okay, this guy was paying attention to me.
Right.
And that's just important. Not don't just go for the appointment. Just talk to them, get them really comfortable talking to you and explaining what the situation is.
Right. And in my experience, that's a really good point. In my experience, if you let that client talk, they're they're not only going to open up to you, but you're not going to have to talk about, um, you know,
Yeah,
as a salesperson would say, closing the deal. They're going to go there. They're going to say, well, do you have any time on your schedule? I'd really like to book some sessions.
right.
Can we go ahead and do that now? You'll know that yes, you did it right. You did it sufficiently when when you start having clients tell you that.
Yeah, yeah,
And they will. And for me, I know you like to take the credit card. I take it one step further, and I have my clients prepay for their session.
yeah,
And I explain to them my cancellation policy. You need to give me 2 business days notice, um, because this time slot, when you purchase it, it's yours.
yeah,
No one can take it away from you.
yeah.
Um,
Yeah, that
so
that
whether
really that really ups the priority of making the appointment, and this is important, and I got to pay attention.
Yes,
Yeah,
exactly. They've got skin in the game. They're making a commitment with uh, with that payment.
hmm absolutely. That's
They're gonna probably show up.
yeah, yeah. Probably, you think? Have they ever not shown up?
You'd be surprised,
Oh, really? And you still
you
have the
know.
payment? Oh,
That's right.
oh wow.
Yeah, sometimes they'll prepay and then for whatever reason, you
Yeah,
know,
yeah,
and I'm not a jerk most of the time. If they get sick, I understand. Sometimes you really don't know that you're sick until the day of.
hmm
And if they're sincere, if they strike me as being really genuine and sorry that they're sick and they're going to miss their appointment, then in most of those situations, I'll go ahead and reschedule them without a
right,
problem, even if it's the day of,
right.
right? But
Well,
that doesn't really happen that often.
interesting that, and that just happened with me today. I got up, my secretary called me and said, this appointment called and she's in the hospital. I can't make it. And so I got it
Ah,
through my secretary, and I thought, well, okay. And I made a point of calling up this lady's mom saying, you made this appointment for your daughter. I understand completely. Uh, I will be available, when you want to schedule an appointment, and I'm just concerned about her well-being, and I just wishing you the very best. So, yeah, you have to be a human being about these things,
right.
you know. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Well,
Very
John,
good.
another great Hypnotorious podcast. I love this. I hope any of the listeners here have any ideas of what to talk about. We'll cover any area. I mean, we've gone to weird places, so
Yeah.
we'll talk about it if you like. And we'll be doing this probably every Wednesday. That's when the podcast comes out. And if you have any questions, give us a call. John, talk about your practice.
I am John Wylie. I own Boise Hypnosis in beautiful Boise, Idaho. I'm the author of The Ultimate Guide to Hypnosis that you can find on Amazon.com. And I'm a good friend of David Barron.
Yes, indeed. And I am David Barron. I operate New Hampshire Hypnosis in Bedford, New Hampshire. I've been operating it for about since 2010. And I also operate on the other side of the country in Ontario, Oregon. In Eastern Oregon Hypnosis is the name of the So you can find me on Eastern Oregon Hypnosis.com or New Hampshire Hypnosis.com. And like John, I have written a couple books. Just Google it, you'll find it. So John, thank you very much. This has been always great.
A lot of fun.
Okay. Take
Talk to you
care.
later.
All right. Bye.